respond, then that's perfectly fine.
Cool. Thanks, George. Thank you, Karen. So welcome to Roya and to Simone, and very excited to have both of you with us today. Just to say thank you to all the participants. The way we're going to work the next hour and probably 20 minutes is to be in a community of philosophical inquiry together, which is the pedagogy of philosophy with children, which is something that I'm particularly interested in. And as I said last week, the way I met Karen. So we're going to really be thinking with and through questions, and that's really the way we'd like to work and play, if we'd like. Zoom can be a very formal space. You know, you sort of keep thinking, I've got to be like this in my screen. So let's just think about how we can be together. So as I said last week too, let's imagine we're in a circle and we're listening differently to each other. There is a bit of a format, but the participants are invited to participate in our next hour together. So I'll be directing questions at Simone and Roya, and then actually after the first question, they're going to end with a question which anyone in Zoom is able to not answer, but maybe let the questions provoke other questions for you about post-qual research, about PhD processes, about supervision. And also just to add, we want this to be a space that is more joyful and engaging and generative, because not all spaces in academia are that way. And I think we can do something to change the way things usually are. So I'm going to start off by saying to either Roya or Simone, sorry to put you both on the spot, but you will be on the spot for the next hour and a bit, to ask either of you who would like to go first, and I'll read the question that you've been asked to prepare, so that everybody knows what you're thinking about. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves briefly by sharing one example from your PhD process, which expresses what worked in terms of supervision for your research or you as a PhD student, and then ending that introduction with a question that you have formulated. And then maybe I could just say, while we are about to start, to say thank you to Ezra, who was here with us last week. His session is available on YouTube to listen to and to be part of that recording. So good to have you back. And if you're interested in doing this in the next couple of months, let us know if you'd like to share whichever part of your PhD you're in. So Roya, would you like to go first, or we'll give... yeah, Roya, would that be good?
Yeah, I can go first. Hi, everyone. My name is Roya. I'm a first-year PhD student at Arizona State University in the United States. I am currently interested in curriculum studies, and my task within this cohort was to explore the literature related to what and how post-qual is being taught in higher education contexts, like, and what pedagogies are being used. And so I'm a first year, and coming into this program, or into my program, not knowing much about research, and then being introduced to post-qual was very opening and exciting, and allowed me to have the permission to take research where it might be and what it could be. So in regard to what worked, I would say having my mentor tell me that it's okay to not understand and to read for inspiration over understanding. That was very comforting, because throughout my life, I always felt like I had to understand everything I read, and to be finally in a space where I had the permission to be confused and ask more questions and to read for inspiration. That was very comforting. And also to think about what post-qualitative inquiry is not, rather than what it is also helpful for conceptualizing it, which I'm still trying to do. So my question, I guess, that I will end with is, what offerings does post-qualitative inquiry offer for teacher preparation programs? I'm currently in a education PhD, so I'm interested in teacher preparation for public school teachers and curriculum development. So, you know, through this process, I've been thinking about what can post-qualitative inquiry offer to that space.
Roya, could I ask you to one more time just say your question? Sorry, because I'm trying to type it for the chat.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So what offerings does post-qualitative inquiry hold for teacher preparation programs?
Thank you.
Thank you, Roya. Thanks so much. So that's a question that all of us can hold while we listen to Simone introduce herself and her. Simone, do you want me to repeat the question, or are you happy to go ahead?
Okay, I'm happy to go ahead. So my understanding, I'll just introduce myself first and then respond to the question. Yeah, okay, great. So hello, everyone. My name is Simone Blom, Dr. Simone Blom, I should add. I'm coming to you from Australia, where it's currently 12 past midnight. And I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the lands which I come from, which is the Widjabul people of the Bundjalung Nation, and just to say that the land always was and always will be Aboriginal land. And I'd like to also just thank Cara and Rose-Anne and George for the invitation to be here, and also to surprisingly see one of my colleagues, Maya, here, also from Australia, so that's wonderful. I just wanted to share something with you about my PhD process, and I'm just going to share my screen. And so this image is what really got me started in terms of thinking how research could be done differently. And I think of this as the diffractive rings. And this was the title of my PhD, which I finished in November last year, Returning Learning, Exploring Childhood Nature Through Posthumanism. So there's something about the rings, and diffraction just fascinated me. And I've got a science undergrad, but I loved how Karen Barad pushed diffraction into this amazing space where we could think about it in our classrooms and in our everyday practice as teachers. And having been a teacher in high schools, primary schools, and now in tertiary at university for the last 20-something years, it really fascinated me how I could use this as a theoretical underpinning for undertaking my research. And there's a particular quote that I just loved from Diffracting Diffraction, which is Brad's 2014 article in Parallax, where they say, darkness is not mere absence, but rather an abundance. Indeed, darkness is not light's expelled other, for it haunts its own interior. And I just saw that in these diffractive rings. Hey, you've got the shadows, and you've got the the parts that really stand out, and that everything affects everything, and there's no such thing as the nothingness of darkness, that everything is full, and there's light and there's particles in the same instance. It got me really fascinated by what that means for the classroom. My research question that I did come to you.
Simone? Someone in chat, Sarah, is asking, would you mind reading that quote one more time from Barad from Diffracting Diffraction?
Yeah, certainly. Darkness is not mere absence, but rather an abundance. Indeed, darkness is not light's expelled other, for it haunts its own interior.
Thank you.
And so with that kind of thinking and in that space, I came to the question of what are teachers' perceptions of nature and how does it inform their pedagogy through this post-human lens. And then I did my lit review, and I looked at what people have researched in the past around teachers' environmental perceptions and practice, environmental education in general, and childhood. And I put together this theoretical perspective around childhood nature, material discursive practices, and effective atmospheres to look at teachers' perceptions and pedagogies. And then I got to the methodology, and at that point, I got a bit stuck, and I also needed to get unstuck. So I was quite clearly doing an ethnography. I'd adopted a diffractive ethnography. So I had a methodological approach, and I really appreciate the discussions that you started last week, Ezra. I did watch the recording. I didn't get up at midnight last week as well, but just around, you know, what is post-qualitative, and almost can we do it in a PhD, which is all about having a process and having a methodology. So I kind of sat there, I don't know if it was for a year or more, in what I was calling the space in between qualitative and post-qualitative, and saying, well, I'm really in qualitative research. I can't deny that I'm using an ethnography, and that's very conventional qualitative, but it's not quite conventional because I'm using a diffractive analysis. I'm using posthumanism as my theory, and that doesn't fit into how conventional qualitative research is analysed. You know, I didn't have themes and do the, you know, breaking everything down in that reductionist approach. I saw everything as quite expansive. And one of my supervisors said, you can't just hang in the space between, you've got to have something, like you've got to name it. And I was reading a lot of St. Pierre, and the more I read, I've got pages of her work where I went, I can't fit into that. So yeah, I decided I was doing trans-qualitative research and justified my case for that. And I was inspired by St. Pierre because in her own PhD research was what led to post-qualitative. You know, she was forced into using qualitative at the time, but she looked back and went, well, it wasn't actually, this is what it was. And it was her PhD that inspired the whole post-qualitative movement. And so I went, oh, well, you know, it's okay for my PhD to have its own thing, and it's okay for it to be trans-qualitative. And so that's really where I went with it. And then my diffractive, I've just got 2 more quick slides. Sorry, I'm probably talking for a bit too long. It's hard after you finish your PhD, there's so much to say. So this was kind of how I was thinking with my diffractive analysis. I used this image out of Meeting the Universe Halfway by Barad, and just thought of it in terms of, you know, oh, this is the Niels Bohr's 2-slit experiment, but I was kind of thinking about it in terms of how I conceptualized diffraction through the theories that are opposed. So thinking of all the data that I had and how I was pushing that through these theories to make it an expansion, and also to see how they all kind of layered over each other in creating more data. And that was really fun to kind of play with it in that way. And then I ended up with my data being presented as diffractive data entanglements. And these were kind of like the principles of that, if you like, that I'd pulled from doing an analysis of a lot of articles that had used diffractive analysis in all kinds of ways. So that's it. And my question that I got to, and I guess having completed my PhD and being in this space, is how do we make our research matter? And I can pop it in the chat if you like.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Simone, and thank you, Roya. And I know that Dr. Blom, we have to congratulate you. It's very exciting to get to the doctor part, and Roya, we know that's where you. So what I'm going to suggest, there are a couple of comments, so maybe I'll read what people have written. We've got, Roya actually said, Sarah says, thanks for rereading the quote. Roya loves your visualization. Thank you for your question, Simone. And Hilary wrote, love the diffractive grating from the diffractive rings. And so, as I said, we'll ask Roya and Simone to each answer those questions, and we're not answering the question, because we're going to ask ourselves more questions based on those questions, and then I'm going to open it up to anyone else in the room. So Roya, maybe to give Simone a moment, or Simone, you can answer Roya's question first. Maybe we'll do it like that.
Yeah, sure.
So
In terms of what post-qualitative inquiry offers teacher preparation programs, I think it's got a huge amount to offer, and I see post-qualitative as really being that expansive generative process. So whereas a lot of research to date, which has followed more conventional research processes, as I mentioned, has been really reductionist, crunching numbers and trying to get research into some nice little box. If we don't have that as our guide, then, what are the possibilities? It's endless. If we're looking at, using theories such as posthumanism, new materialism, we're really going into the kind of uncharted waters of the way that we're going to see classrooms differently, and then be able to prepare our teachers as per that. And I think it's really exciting.
Thank you. As a start, thank you. Great. Roya, do you have a suggestion or a comment about Simone's question about how do we make our research matter?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to say there. I would say I just talking to people and it's everywhere, like having people understand that the world is not binary and it's not this or that. Like, I think that is what can open more people to it and allow more people to understand that it does matter, because it isn't just black and white. It is so much more complex than that. And I think just getting people like reeled in that way is maybe a way to start to get it to matter, or be people to be receptive to it. Yeah, that's just kind of how I'm thinking at the moment. Just that life is too complex for post-qual not to be in the conversation and for it to not matter.
Thank you. Great. We've got 2 provocations, we have 2 questions, and so I'm opening it up to the rest of our community here. Would anybody like to make a comment? I see Karen waving her hand. Karen, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm really excited. By diffracting the 2 questions, so what really sort of tickled me, Roya, was you thinking about what it is not, that you found that very helpful. And then when Simone was saying, how do we make our research matter? And then I thought, well, yeah, if you diffract them through how do we make our research not matter? And then and I thought that was really helpful, because it also connects with your point about, Roya, when you were saying you wanted to make it more complex. And I suppose I have a question here, is that I'm in the middle of marking, and I'm where my students are tracing objects as part of their professional dilemmas. And so it's really at the heart of the matter of why it matters, right, to do this work. And the difficulty my students have to stay with the specificity of the object, of their situation, etc. And why does that matter? And I think that your point about complexifying, doing justice to the complexity of our world as lecturers, teachers, educators, etc. And then I suppose the question that I have there for you, Simone, is that, the childhood nature, it was in quite a few of your slides and in your title, and to what extent it also opens up possibilities, not only for Indigenous thinking, but also for the children, or for our children's thinking, before they become literate, right? So So animism, other ways of becoming, and to what extent what it is that we can learn from our young children, and how that could be at the center of curriculum innovation. I don't know whether, yeah, that's sort of a question what I'm just chucking in the air here.
I love it, Karen. Thank you. Yeah, the concept of childhood and nature came about, gosh, maybe 8 years ago or so, by one of my supervisors in a team. She was working in a project she was working on. And as you were sharing, Roya, it was really about challenging these huge dualisms and binaries that we kind of come at, I don't want to say naturally, but they're just everywhere, and looking at how we break them down. And this idea that childhood and nature were two distinct entities was what the childhood nature theorizing is designed to challenge. And throughout my PhD, I actually used a lot of your work, Karen, around misogyny and ageism. And I just, yeah, there is so much we can learn from children. I'm really fascinated in working with teachers. So I did end up making that my study. At the start, I was thinking about including the children as well, and it was too big and I needed to just focus down. Because obviously the children are an inherent part of the classroom. You can't deny that. And that was actually a joy in my research, was to see those interactions between teacher and student. And yeah, children have this amazing wisdom, and we've got a lot to learn. And I just through doing this research in particular, but also I've got an 11-year-old daughter. So, this research has taken part in a big chunk of her schooling as well. And just seeing the subtle ways that we kind of diminish our children through school, and the just some of the horrible practices that schools just accepted in classrooms as the way it is, or that's just how school is, and it doesn't have to be, and it shouldn't be. And there's a really long way to go in really acknowledging what we're doing to our children through schools. So yeah, I don't feel like that was the focus of my research, but it was definitely something that I was very aware of. And I often just talk to my daughter every day. I'm kind of like, how was school today? And you get a sense of where your children are at, because you know them so well when they come home, and what they've been affected by, and looking at the ways that we can just stop those practices that make kids feel like they're less, or don't have valid ideas. And it's obviously something I'm really passionate about, so I'll stop talking, because I can probably keep talking for the rest of that time together. But I don't know if that answered it, Karen, but Thank you.
Thanks. Roya, you have another comment, and I have a comment, so I'll and I know there's someone in the chat. So Roya, you go ahead, and then I'll read Ruth's, and then I have a comment too. Yeah.
Sorry, I know we want to give everyone else a chance to speak, but I was just thinking, just simply asking the question, like you were saying, Simone, what are we doing to our children through schooling? And just opening that up and asking someone, I wonder what people would say. I doubt anybody would say preparing them for the future or allowing them to explore the world. What are we teaching them? Just simply asking that question, I think, could allow a lot of people to just think about what we are doing. So thank you for offering.
Right. Thanks, Roya. I completely agree with you. Ruth, do you want to ask your question, or would you like me to read? Is Ruth still? Yeah. Would you like me to?
She is here.
Oh, she is. Hi, Ruth.
Hi there. Thanks so much. Can you hear me?
we
Yeah.
can.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, thanks so much for that, Simone. It's just a beautiful and very rich thinking through of those sort of diffractive potentialities. And that's the first time I've seen those ideas put in that way in terms of Niels Bohr's two-slit experiment, which is something I grapple with quite regularly. And I just wondered, when you were putting together the diffraction circles on that final slide and your data areas were in each of those circles, whether you were grappling with how to not represent, but how to somehow show and share these issues without having them in such a sort of central way within what is obviously a very entangled philosophy. So all the different sort of areas that you had, it's something I grapple with a lot in terms of how to articulate those without it suddenly becoming a very centered piece of representation, I guess. So yeah, I'd just be interested to hear your thoughts on how you grappled with that.
Yeah, thanks, Ruth, and thanks for the question and your interest. Yes, I did. I grappled and I grappled and I grappled, and it got very messy, and I'd be scribbling out lines on my diagrams and, you know, placing things. And I did get to the point that it is a, you know, we can say whatever we want, but it is a representation. And to me, it helped my thinking. You know, I don't see them as being, you know, even though they're kind of like capturing a single point in time, I see them still as being, just because of the nature of the diffractive rings, they're always moving, right? So, you know, I just imagine that those diagrams are in constant flux, and they're all interacting all the time. And I guess that was some of the freedom that transqualitative inquiry opened up for me. Was I just accepted some of those limitations that I literally couldn't demonstrate in terms of going solely down the post-qualitative inquiry road. And I love visual representations. They kind of help me to make sense of the world and these complex places that we're delving into. So it's not designed to be a simplification, but, you know, I guess a way to assist in communication. Yeah.
Thanks, Simone. And thanks, Ruth, for your question. Maybe if I could just make a comment to Roya and to Simone, because both your questions seem to collide with something that I'm finding quite important that I'm doing. So something I've just completed this week, Roya, is working with our postgrad students at UCT who are becoming teachers. And so I've had a 5-session series with them, and I had early in the year, I worked with them in a group called Ethics. And so there are 135 of them in this massive lecture theatre that takes 220 people. And I take down all these materials, and there I am with my oil pastels, and now this week Play-Doh. And it's interesting. I mean, I'll make 1 or 2 comments about that. I'll have a colleague say, well, what are they doing with the oil pastels? And I think, well, that's the way we're disrupting the bind, because nobody asked me what they're doing with their pens or what they're doing with their laptops. And so for the students, just this idea. And so we've been talking about it because the oil pastels are there. And I'm not saying, and they've written some reflections, and they've written, oh, we waited. You didn't say this is what you must do with them, because the idea is, when we think about the binaries the world has created, and Roya, you asked, you know, the world is not binary, it's not black and white, correct? Because I'm all about the color. And for people to be more receptive, but what about how the more than human can be more receptive to the more than human too? How are we making space for those colors in a university classroom? And when I say to them, in your undergrad, did anyone ever offer you a crayon? And they say no. And then they raise their hand and say, but actually in high school, no one offered us a crayon unless we were in art either. And so when you ask the question, Simone, what are we doing to our children in schools? What are we doing to our children when they get to university, and what are we doing to our children, you know, when they become teachers? And so the question about disrupting this idea that this is in and that is out has been for me this idea of this Postqual. And thanks, I hope I'm making a bit of sense, but thank you for those questions. And so how do we make our research matter? By disrupting these binaries that have been enforced all the time, that continue to be enforced on us. So yeah, just to say thank you. I'm quite passionate about what you've managed to elicit with us today. I see there's another, sorry, did somebody want to say something? I see there's another question from Maya or comment. Maya, would you like to read your, well, sorry, maybe Roya and Simone, if you'd like to respond to what I'm saying, but we're just sort of opening this all up. And then I'm going to ask Maya if she'd like to comment. I see she's put, there's someone with her too. Okay, Maya, do you want to read your comment?
Sure. Apologies, my little one has just woken up, but I just wanted to share when we were talking about considering and asking those questions around what schooling is doing to our children. I'm not sure if I'm just in a little bubble in the community that I'm in, but there seems to be a real growing shift towards home or unschooling. And I just wanted to make that comment that I feel like that shift demonstrates that more and more parents are grappling with what schooling is doing to children.
Thanks, Maya.
Yeah, and I'll just maybe I'm in the same bubble, and maybe we could call it Australia. I'm not sure what's happening in other places in the world, but certainly after COVID, where we were forced into lockdown, and many parents were forced into a the homeschooling situation, there's been, I've spoken to teachers, and there has been a lowered enrollment in a lot of schools, in a lot of our local schools anyway, because parents are opting to homeschool after the pandemic. So yeah, interesting. Yeah, thanks, Maya. Thanks for being here too in the middle of the night with your baba.
Such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Maya. Thanks, Sarah. If you'd like to ask your question, Sarah, if I could just say, I read one line of your question. I thought, that's fascinating. What are post-qualitative teachers? But actually there's more. So that's quite an interesting question. Sarah, do you want to go again?
Sure, I'd love to. The question, what is schooling doing to our children? I feel like that is something we've been asking for a very, 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 very long time, and responding to or trying to take some responsibility for, and so on. And so I guess I'm interested in us thinking about what are post-qualitative teachers or researchers working in interaction with kids and teachers and space doing differently, as again another way to think with the world and the troubling what we're seeing. And that led me to the next question, which is more specific about the diffractive rings that are fascinating. So I guess this is for me, a drive toward particularities. I'm sort of interested in what your diffractive rings helped you, or even others you shared your representations with, see or understand or respond differently. So if we could look at the diffractive rings, and you could actually talk about what did this help you see that you didn't see, or maybe couldn't see before. And for both of you.
Yeah, sure. Would you want me to go, Roya, on that one?
You can go ahead.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So for me, it was really about the fact that everything is interacting all the time. Like it's inseparable. And I loved also what Barad shared in their book, Meeting the Universe Halfway. I'm paraphrasing here, so I hope I do it justice. But when you walk into a room and turn the light on, effectively you're rearranging the furniture just by everything that takes place in that single action. And you don't walk into a room, turn the light on and go, oh, I've rearranged the furniture. You know, it's not that kind of actual, you know, happening, but it is. And so when I did my research, the diffractive rings really helped me to go, oh, there's this whole field, there's fields of energy that we just don't see, that we are not thinking about all the time, but that are actually there, and they actually have impact and they have effect. They affect bodies. They're rearranging things all the time. And it was fascinating to talk to the teachers. I had conversations with the teachers that I worked with in my study. And it was like they were given permission to talk about all of this. They were given permission to talk about everything that they feel in the classroom all the time. And those moments of just like, oh, wow, it's so amazing having this conversation. I hadn't even realized that, but we watched some of the videos of them teaching, which was like a practice that I also took from one of Karen's books around, you know, recording the lesson and then watching it back with the teacher and having a conversation about that. And that was just, you know, eye-opening for them to be able to talk in that language, where, oh yeah, you can see, oh, I did this, and then look what happened for the children. Oh, that child did that, look how it impacted the other children. And just those subtle things that kind of would happen in all of those moments. I actually remember, I can't quite remember the details, Karen, you might want to fill in here, but in your book, Learning Language and Literacy, Reading Classrooms Differently, where you had the Philosophy for Kids circle, and you were reading the book, and then someone spoke up about the politician in South Africa who had lots of money, and then there was just like this energy kind of darting around the circle. And I really took that moment in your book and went, oh, that is just happening all of the time. And I see that in those diffractive rings, that you can't just isolate something and pretend it doesn't matter.
Well,
Thanks.
what was amazing about that book, and what is amazing, actually, talking about amazing, that we've got quite a few of the authors of the book around. Yeah, I don't know whether you're aware of that, but and I haven't seen Kai and Patrick for quite a while, so it's wonderful that you're here. And Rose-Anne, and you know, and what the what was so and when we talk about diffraction is also how. So it was a 1 hour lesson for anybody who was wondering, and it was a literacy lesson, but it was taught through Philosophy for Children, and it was one picture book, but also how, apart from the first half being quite a sort of theoretical write-up, and I was also completely breaking through this whole idea. I mean, I was severely punished by publishing something that is really theoretical, and then because then it became just an edited book, and then it earned me very little points, and all that stuff is so fascinating. And then the second part of it was how then people who were either in it, and some of them were the teachers, and then we had so many people who normally speaking wouldn't be involved in a teaching situation, like the teacher, but also the author and illustrator of the picture book, and then the teacher, visiting teacher, and it was also a modeling session for our students and who were observing. It was just so many like boundaries that normally are, you know, quite, you know, kept very severely, we're all sort of pushed against. And but then how those chapters, and that's why I'm saying it, you know, when we talk about rings, how chapters can diffract through one another, and then it's not that necessarily, although there was disagreement between authors about reading some of the data, but then how that can be worked with in a very productive kind of way through the diffractive process. And I have to say, I mean, it was a project that took 2 years. It was Literacies, Literature and Learning. But it was so worth it. You know, it was just such an amazing project. Yeah, so thanks for actually referring to it. I'm very, very attached to that to that book and to that project, and how diffraction worked all the way through. Actually, very, very exciting, and how I just found myself suddenly filming those kids as they read a book on the floor with my iPad. I didn't have a clue what I was doing, and I loved the way. You started by talking about read for inspiration rather than understanding, Roya. And I'm struggling now with my students who keep on saying, yeah, but I don't understand you. I don't understand you. And I've just got to quote you. It's like, come, read for inspiration rather than people when they start, I'm so confused. And then usually it comes, you haven't been clear enough in your instruction. Tell me again what I need to do for my assessment, and when you say, well, don't feed me back what I already know, then they have, I said, well, what do you mean by that? I said, no, don't start quoting from reading that I've given you, which I'm already familiar with, do something else with it. And yeah, very unsettling. And yeah, I love that notion of read for inspiration rather than for understanding.
Thanks, Karen. And just before we get on to Roya and Simone, we're going to get on to the next question. But if I could just add one comment about the book, and when you think about what does this mean for our research and teaching, I met the young person that I in the chapter about literacy questions and shares. There's a little young boy, he's grade 2 at the time, and he was wanting to be this marine biologist. But I saw him again. He happens to be a colleague's son, and I said to him, he was waiting around. I said, wait, I've got a book I'd like you to read. So we were in a staff meeting, and I gave him this, I showed him the chapter, and he said, after he read it, he goes, yeah, that's me. And I thought that was one of the other things about the book. It is very affirming of children, and we all wrote about them in a very different way. That was intentional. How do we see child not as deficit, etc., etc. So just another comment. But I'm going to, and if you don't mind, Simone, I just have to say, some of us are in South Africa, and I know our kind Patrick won't mind me telling everyone you're in South Africa. So when you mention, when you walk into a room and turn the light on, this is not a total reality for us in South Africa, because we're currently experiencing excessive load shedding. You can Google and look up because of corruption, etc., etc. And so tonight, for example, we will have no power from 8 to 12, and George is probably going off at the moment, and Kai and Patrick are nodding because they're happy now because they have daylight. But it's a reality. So that's, and think of that.
That's part of it.
Exactly.
And what that means for children in our schooling system currently, it's having a complete impact on their lives. Very different. Okay, so Roya and Simone, thank you for your patience and for answering and engaging with us and these questions and our excitement around the work you're bringing to us in different ways. There's also a question for your, Simone, I have started reading your PhD. Thank you to, and to Ezra too. I've managed to dip into some of parts of what he's doing, which has been so enriching. So thanks for sending that, and I'm sure you can pop that in. But maybe before you do that, let's do the third question, which is, how did the questions that were driving you or your research shift through the process of your research? And Roya, we know you in a different space and time with your PhD, time space mattering of your PhD. So answer it in the way that makes the most sense to you. And then Simone, you can do a looking forward, looking back, but not that it's on a line. Thanks.
Sure. So the question, I'm sorry, just to be clear, are we answering the question about what works?
The question about, we can go back there, but the question about the questions that drove your research and whether they shifted in the process of your research, or what questions are driving your research at the moment?
Yes, so I was tasked with trying to qualitative inquiries taught in higher education contexts. And I am still, trying to conceptualize the best, I guess, other questions that came up. But I think like childhood education has a lot to offer. And that is something I'm realizing. And I think intra-active pedagogies is something that continued to come up that I'm still trying to explore. So I guess I'm trying to figure out now as someone who has always been in the critical space, how I bring critical theory into Postqual. How do I merge the two? How do I get inspiration from both to do critical work in schools and in curriculum?
Thank you. Great. Simone?
Can I just
sorry.
just a quick comment is that when you were saying, Roya, that you were tasked to do this, is that Mirka Koro is Roya's supervisor, and she is part of this collective and also leading the kind of working group on a course development. So so it is also thanks to Mirka, who's not here in the room. I'm actually meeting her a bit later. That all that happened, you know, for you, and so, but also your generosity to, although it wasn't really part directly initially, at least, you know, we don't know where this is going to take you, that you just took on this task. So that's really great. So I would like to thank you for that.
No, thank you for the opportunity. I think it's been great starting my PhD program to be welcomed into this space and allow myself to, again, have the opportunity and the permission to not understand and explore, like, what could my work become. So, yeah.
Right. Thanks. Simone, do you want to talk? And then we've got a couple more comments. So I'll first let you answer or talk to the question. How did the questions that were driving your research shift through the process of your research?
At the start, it literally felt like it changed every week. It wasn't that severe, I know, but yep, here's my proposal. Great, this is what I'm going to go forward with. Amazing. And then, no, that's not it. No, that's no. And so often in my supervisory meetings, what are you actually going to find out if you ask that? Oh, it's way too broad. Oh, you can't, yeah, that'll take you decades to answer that. So it was just a really funny process where, you know, you're constantly like, yeah, I've nailed it. Yeah, there's my question. And then just having that, you know, that thought that you've got something you've got it pinned down, you've got it there, and just to let that go and just, it's almost like, you know, we've been talking about trying to understand things rather than just let them wash over you. You know, I see that with the question too, like, great, there's a question, let's just go with that and let's just see what happens with that question. And if that works and if it doesn't, that's fine too. Not to be so fixated on like, yes, I've captured it and it's my question. You know, the question presents itself, it's got its own agency, and it's almost like it shows you what the question is as you go through the process, which I really enjoyed by the end, because it just, I don't know, seemed like it just got clearer and clearer, and it had nothing to do with me, you know, spending hours trying to work it out, even though that's what I was doing at the start. Once I just let go and saw that it kept changing, it was much easier for the question to actually present itself.
Great. We have a couple of, I mean, I was also thinking about how Karen would say to me, I mean, or not necessarily, but Karen and I also worked with inquiries all the time, working with questions that could not be answered. So that was quite constant. And I think that made a difference, because why are you asking this if you already know is a big part of, you know, if I already know that, you know, what can not be known in a way that it can be. So that was, that's really, it was quite important to me. I'm going to just read through some of the comments, and I think Hilary's question is very significant, where she says, how does it world the world when you can't switch the light on? And I think that's really quite important. And then Hilary, as I mentioned earlier, she asked if you could give us a link to your thesis in your university depository. And then, sorry, and then Hilary's Simone's dropped it off, and David's saying thank you to Simone, especially your concept. I was also going to ask you your concept of postqualitative. So maybe let's see if we get there. Roya, when Karen mentioned that, she said this is a direct quote from Dr. Mirka Koro. So please, I also know Mirka, tell her we say hi. And Simone thanks Mirka for their work. It guided her so much on her journey. And then Sarah Michaels asks, what is an example of an interactive pedagogy? What might be design characteristics? And then also, what if we did research for inspiration, what flashes up rather than definitive understanding? And so to Simone and Roya, these are not questions necessarily for you. They can be questions for the group, but if you want to respond to one or two of them, please do. We're still doing okay with time at 5. Well, let's do this for another 4 minutes, and then I'll ask our last question. So, okay. And then Sarah Burton says, yes, I feel like I'm doing research for inspiration, working out what I'm trying to find out about being in the space and thinking about what it's not about. So Simone or Roya, do you want to grab one of those and swing to the next tree?
Did you want to go, Roya?
I guess I can talk on what is an interactive pedagogy. I will say I would not be able to give a definition, but I will say from my readings thus far, what I understand about it, or what I think I understand about it, is that it's perhaps a pedagogy with no definite like end result, no objective, and it's an offering to see what can become. So some sort of like a teaching strategy, an offering, a provocation that has no end, has no objective, has no prediction of what could come. And that's sort of something that I saw as I was reading. And it was interesting as I was, through my literature review, I was trying to figure out keywords, and, ended up being interactive pedagogy was a very helpful keyword for me to find things that were in alignment for this literature review that I'm working on. So can't give a definite description or a definition, but that's kind of my description, I guess, if that helps.
I might jump in there if it's okay, Rose-Anne. And thanks for starting it off, Roya. That just made me kind of think about that as a question as well. And childhood nature is designed to kind of disrupt the distinction between teacher and child in the classroom. And I put that into practice, and that's what I see as being interactive, is that you're equal players. You're both in a space and you're learning together. And as much as I really put that into practice, where it's not about a binary of, there's the knowing being teacher at the front. It's really, okay, how is our community working together? And I guess on that, in our next 2 minutes, if anyone else did have anything to share from this group, I actually am busting to hear what others have got to say. So if there's time, that would be great.
Actually, we are doing fine with time. So yeah, no, you can say a bit more, Simone, and then I'll ask anyone else.
Oh no, that's totally fine. I feel complete. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Thanks, Nobonke. Would anybody like to comment on any of the questions that have been posed or raised at the moment? Anyone else in the room who maybe would like to add to our conversation?
Can I just add maybe, with the interactive pedagogy, and it's also already in the chat in terms of the world itself. So if, the childhood nature and the non-binary, which we started off with, is part of that. But I think if we shift the ontology to not to substances, but to phenomena, then what does that mean for our pedagogy? So it is that we disrupt, that we've got teachers and learners, and we've got them of particular ages and in conversation or whatever with one another, and also it's emergent. I agree with you very much, but I think what we tend to think as teachers is that we're outside a process of teaching, and then we think of, I don't know, this is what I'm going to teach, and this is the resource I'm going to bring in, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that, and then stuff happens, and And then I can bring in lots of materials, but that's not only what happens. I think is that if you see yourself as emergent within that process, so you can't step out and then do it and then get out of it and then reflect back on it. But if you're always in it, then so what is it that is thing? Of course, it's actually really hard. I don't know whether anyone can just sort of help there, because if we think about interaction as different from interaction, is not when we are interacting with one another, but if interacting is one where we both or are come into being through the relation. So if the relation is already prior to us even being part of that relation, then a lot of it is also attuning to the relation that I'm already a part of. So becoming aware that, whoa, there's a bit of a smell from the factory next door, or wow, it's going to be load shedding in a minute, and where does that leave me as a lecturer? And it is very cold. So it's I suppose that attunement to the relations, that some of it is more than human and other is human.
Can I share something that I'm not sure is relevant, but that I'm thinking about when I'm hearing you speak, Karen, if I'm not interrupting your thoughts there? So I'm working on a project at the moment with Professor Amy Carter-Mackenzie around nature play and nature play pedagogies, and how nature play influences the learning of STEM. But funnily, she says, we had to talk about STEM to get the funding, but really, I want to go much deeper. And one of the things that I'm finding interesting as I'm thinking about nature play pedagogies and trying to look at it through a post-human lens is one observation is that a lot of the teachers talked about, the environment as the third teacher, that kind of Montessori idea. But when they actually were talking about their pedagogies and their practices, they gave a lot of examples of how their approaches were child-led, but not so much how they were environment-led, how the more than human was an active agent in the learning experiences and the processes. So I think it just demonstrates that human-centric lens and the impact that has, that even though they were in many different ways achieving post-human pedagogies of play, they weren't able to articulate that or describe it or talk about it in that way, but it was still very obvious that the how agentic the non-human was in their approaches. Yeah, just lots of opportunities for us to think about how post-qualitative approaches can expand and evolve and inspire practice.
And just quickly a comment, Simone, thanks for putting Amy in there. And of course, Amy, and together with Karen Malone and others, wrote this or put together, edited this amazing handbook on childhood nature. So if people are interested in it, it's really worth checking out. It's like, it was a massive project.
Very
massive.
I've never actually seen it, only online, which is like 4,000 to 5,000 pages, but incredible.
She was leading that project.
I'm thinking so much about interactive pedagogies, but I'm just I'm just going to make one comment, and I hope it's not just me trying to circle back, but hopefully create a new interactive pattern. But the students I'm working with are high school students, And so I wonder if it makes a difference when you think about, oh, I walked into a university auditorium with 135 foundation phase students, but it does do some shifting. And then I wondered too what that means for I mean, I'm wondering what it means for pedagogy when you're thinking the students I worked with today are actually high school students. And so also, so how materials come to matter in these different spaces. I'm just offering that as another way to keep thinking that when we're foregrounding the more than human too, what else is happening to those materials who have also been put into particular spaces and places and yeah, even sorry, I'm just thinking, bubbling through some of these ideas around this is actually, as you can hear, it's a good thing. I'm okay. I'm just working through those research questions to get myself to another one. But yeah, I'm going to stop there and just ask if we've got one more comment and ask if, thank you. Thanks, Simone, for putting the reference up to that research handbook. Yeah, that was really, I also ended up using some work from that about animals and yeah, I'll think of that in a second. So maybe we can.
Could I just quickly respond, Rose-Anne, too?
Thank you.
Totally. I love that.
Yeah, this is
just
go ahead.
Oh no, you go, guys.
No, I was going to say the thing I can't stand saying. I can't bear it when people say this is a safe space. No, it's not. Let's not ever talk about that. But this is a place you're supposed to be able to think through the thoughts you're thinking. So Sarah, go ahead.
I was just going to add just on what you were sharing, how it is interesting that often we talk about childhood, or when I kind of think about childhood nature, or, you know, it seems like there's a lot of like young children in nature, and how you're talking, Rose-Anne, and then thinking about, you know, what happens at secondary school. Like it seems like it's just so radically different. And I mean, I was in a meeting this week talking about that exact thing. You know, it's like in Australia, there's a lot of kitchen gardens, and in primary schools, they have these amazing veggie gardens. And then often you get to high school and it's suddenly just gone. And yeah, it's just, I guess, just adding to your thought bubble there around that, because I think, you know, it's definitely, I think high schools definitely need some attention too. Yeah.
Definitely. And I mean, further qualify, I've steeped in this foundation phase and early childhood, and through the way my university happens to work, I'm now happen to be in high school, and I'm going, wow, using the pedagogy from early childhood with high school students is blowing their minds. And that's the work we need to be doing. And certainly when we work with, I mean, Roya, you asked this question, teachers who are becoming teachers, people who are becoming teachers, students are becoming teachers, the same thing. But let's swing back to your final question, and then we will have some time for just general discussion, and people can bring up, you know, other things that have come up through our discussion today. But Roya and Simone, our last question, and we both, ironically, some of us know who your supervisors are, so that's actually know them through their work or know who they are. So maybe quite a big part of PhD, you know, the PhD process is this work with your supervisors. And so for you, both of you, what works in supervision when doing post-qualitative research? So maybe you can think of an example or something you'd like to share. Roya, you with Mirka, and Simone, you worked with Amy. So yeah, whoever would like to go first?
Sure. So yeah, with Dr. Mirka Koro, and I meant to clarify, it was in her class that she said, read for inspiration, not for understanding. And that was pretty much what I always go back to when I'm confused. I'm like, okay, I'm inspired. Maybe I don't understand, but I'm inspired, and that's okay. So I would like to thank her for that. And that was so tremendously helpful starting my PhD program and being in this world of constant confusion and not understanding that, and just being comforted in that. So I would say if I had to say the most helpful thing, it would be being comforting, as I said, being comforted to know that it's okay to not understand. But I would say it may have been a little bit more helpful to have some sort of reading list to, you know, influential texts. I still haven't gotten the opportunity to read some of those. And I think if maybe I started out with reading those, it would be easier maybe to think through some of these ideas and know where they are coming from and, you know, the foundations of where they are coming from. So
maybe George, you can say a little bit about our plans on this one on our website. No, shall I say something? Okay, so one of the buttons, oh yeah, go on.
No, please go ahead.
Okay, so one of the buttons, you know, on the website that we're going to do at some point this year is one where it's about the resources and about so also if you yourself have published or can highly recommend certain publications, please let George know, because we're collecting that for that very same purpose, Roya, that you're talking about, you know, where to go. And it doesn't have to be some of the names we're all familiar with, because that's
I'm just putting my email in the chat now. If anyone has any suggestions, please feel free to email me.
Yeah, because that's especially what worked particularly well for you, maybe just to, you know, this phrase or this. And I liked, David, when you were saying about you know, trans qualitative inquiry or research that does something very interesting, doesn't it? And it also made me, ooh, you know, and it's, yeah, anyway.
And maybe, Roya, I'll just add something maybe provocative, but just the idea that there's somebody called Gareth Matthews who talks about child art and how we don't consider children's art worthy because they're children. So I imagine just to kind of disrupt the idea of what is an influential text. I mean, I know what Karen and George are talking about will be on the website, but maybe the work of children could do the same kind of thing if that's reading that differently. I'm just going to, and maybe just putting that out there. Simone?
Yeah, I've actually published a couple of articles with my daughter as well now, so which is amazing. Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah. I'm just going to bounce over just to what Roya shared. What I found with reading at the start and trying to understand was I would read articles and the words literally jumped off the page, and I could not wait to jump back in and read more. I'd read the end of the article, the end of the book, and the words were alive. And particularly in the book of yours, Karen, that I mentioned earlier, you know, that was just such a huge inspiration. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I found this. And it was just, and you know, those finding articles like that became like my guiding light in terms of what influenced me or what inspired me. And then I would read some things and I literally felt like my brain was getting crushed, or not in a really enjoyable way at all. I don't know if it can ever be enjoyable, but it was like a compression rather than expansion. And, you know, that aha, oh, I'm inspired. It would just be like and that my, I guess, effective response was like was how I was guided by my reading. And that was just like a bit of an adventure in the end, which I really enjoyed. And in terms of what worked in supervision when doing post-qual research, again, I don't know if I'd technically say I did post-qual research, so I don't know quite how to answer that. But I guess what worked in terms of me getting to trans-qualitative research was the fact that my supervisors just kind of kept pushing back and were really kind of critical and challenging in terms of, well, because I'd be going to meetings going, okay, so St. Pierre said this, but I'm doing process, like I've got a methodology, like I'm doing a PhD, it follows this. And I know Ezra's nodding, similar to what you might have discussed last week, I saw in the recording. So yeah, I mean, to me that worked. It worked being challenged to that level, and using St. Pierre's foundational work in Postqual as a bit of a guide for me at that point. You know, feels like I started so long ago, 2018, you know, it was there still wasn't heaps around then. So it was all very kind of new, and I could feel my supervisors going on the journey along with me as well. So yeah.
Thank you. I mean, there's kind of a whole thesis happening in the chat. I mean, there's a lot. Thank you. Sorry, first, thank you, Simone. I mean, we're all doing so many things, but maybe we could just read some of those comments in the chat, and everybody's welcome to sort of answer some of them. So I'll go back to David J specifically asked about materiality. David, do you want to ask your question? Yeah. Go for it.
Sure. Thank you so much, Rose-Anne. And it was just when you were talking there, actually, when you mentioned there about your lecture hall, and you were talking about specifically about HE, it just brought to mind some work I've read about by Carol Taylor. You're probably aware of it already, but she works, you probably know about it already, but I know she's got this thing called EduCraft, and she takes into account the light and the material objects and the furniture and all that kind of thing as part of her analysis, but you probably know about that already. That's what came to mind.
It's a good reminder. Thank you. There's a lot out there, David, and I appreciate. Thank you. Appreciate you reminding me of that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. And then we have Hilary saying, is reading for inspiration like reading? Hilary, do you want to ask this question, or do you want?
No, I mean, I think that basically, if we read in response to the way stuff's affecting us, whether it's whether those effects are positive or negative, they're still telling us something. You know, inspiration sounds like you can only learn from stuff that moves you in a positive way. But, you know, if you go with affect, so you read for affect rather than understanding, I think it just broadens it a little bit.
Can somebody remind me? I'm sitting with Meeting the Universe, trying to find where Karen Barad talks about, if you don't understand, just keep, not just understand. And I think we obviously not meaning the understanding in the way we're thinking about it. But where does she write where she says, if you don't understand the word, just keep going past it? But I even think I used my PhD and I can't remember. Anyway, I'll put it in the chat when I get there, maybe.
Isn't it in your Skia book in the interview?
Yeah.
I wonder.
Okay,
Maybe
like
fifth, do you know? Do you remember?
I remember being
offhand.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. We'll find it. Because that helped a lot. When I first started reading Barad, she said, don't worry, just keep going, keep going. Karen also mentioned, Karen, you want to mention this comment about DCD?
No, it's just that I realized that when I was sort of introducing, and it's a bit like the diffracting circles from Simone, you know, how this project is still sort of so entangled with the Decolonizing Early Childhood Discourses project, which actually never finished, although the money sort of finished from the NRF. But so the reading groups that we're doing, this kind of conversation and engagement, you know, if you like us just to, and quite a lot of people that are in the room, they are part of the reading group. So we read and think together, and if people like this kind of thing that we do right now, you know, how this is what we do when we read Barad's text, which actually is not only Barad, but it sort of ends up like that all the time. We decide together what we read, but usually it's Barad, and so we're reading what fleshes up at the moment, but also Meeting the Universe halfway, and we're going very slowly. We're bouncing all over the place, and but it is very much often is these kind of questions about, yeah, but what does it actually mean for education? What does it mean for my research question? And I'm an architect. What does it got to do with da da da? So it's yeah, it's a very generative space in that sense. So you can come in and out. You don't have to read beforehand. And I didn't mention it at the beginning, so I thought I'd just put it in the chat.
Thank you. And then Sarah's written, slow reading in the group is a form of diffractive reading for inspiration. And I think, yeah, we're contesting what inspiration is. I mean, the work we're doing is so important, and it's all about justice. If that's the way we're being inspired, then it's political, the inspiration, I think. Roya, the opportunities that I had for slow reading was a blessing. Thanks, Ruth. You think it's in chapter 7. I was hoping it was in the introduction, so I could quickly glance through it and find it. I don't think I'm going to get through it, but I'm going to look for it before this evening. Karen's popped the book there, Literacy is Literature and Learning, and Simone's thanking Karen and all the authors. My PhD would not be what it is without this work. And then David J says, yeah, great reading about Barad. So I think we've got about 5 minutes left, because I know some people need to. So maybe if you haven't made a comment and you'd like to share something, or maybe Simone and Roya, if you'd like to just kind of a final thought, but not that it's your final thought, the final thought for this part of the of this ongoing conversation. So I'll just invite a couple of last comments. And also we haven't had too much time to think together quietly in the group either. So maybe we should just have 20 seconds of silence, and then we can now ask Simone and Roya to just speak. So let's just think for a second about all these things that have been happening. Okay, thanks. Either Roya or Simone, if you'd like to just have a final comment, and then we'll just go around the room and see if anybody else would like to share something that's shifted for them since we started at 4 o'clock, or yeah. Simone, your eyes look like they're about to say something.
Sure. Yeah, I'm really excited to hear from everyone else, and I just want to thank everyone for being here. But I guess that idea of just being with, and not, in the rush of needing to understand, but allowing what is there to present itself and to show what's next, what's needed.
Thank you. Roya, if you'd like to make a final comment.
Lately, I've been thinking about, and I hear this all the time, like healing your inner child. And I, through this conversation was thinking more about, when did we become not child? When was that moment where we were not a child anymore? Because I constantly feel like I still have that, I'm a kid at heart. So that's just something I've been grappling with through this conversation, and as of late, especially we hear all these conversations surrounding mental health and healing your inner child, and it's just interesting to think about, that's a part of me and who I am, and I don't think there ever really was a moment where I became not a child. I'm still a child at heart. So
there's some people in the room who are really interested in that kind of work and research. And I think, yeah, exactly. Childhood is a time of eye on this. Karen's done a lot of work on that. Walter Cohen talks about, eye on being a childhood, not being, it's not finished and it's not past. I've tried to do some work on that too. So thank you for asking that. Yeah, I think it's a question. The question you're asking is really important too. This research about childhood and child. Yeah.
Rose-Anne noticed Viv disappearing into the dark.
Viv lives in South Africa, and so this is a visual demonstration for anyone who wasn't sure. Shame. Thanks, Viv. Yeah, we all just about managing. Mona's written, thanks for letting me listen. Wow, Mona's in Gaza and the internet connection is unstable. Thanks for all the sharing. Yeah, we're all in different spaces and complicated places in the world. Yeah, thank you, everyone. Is there anyone else who'd like to? Thank you, Lynn. Thanks for being here. Maybe we've got a couple minutes. I'll let George just tell us who's on next week, and then we'll be able to share that this recording will be saved and uploaded so we can keep learning and on thinking through and with these questions. So George, and then I'll say a final thanks.
Sure, thank you so much. This was very interesting. So yeah, last week we had Ezra, and this week we had Simone and Roya, and now up and coming, same time, same place, next week, we have Anna Pilsen. I apologize once again for, I'm definitely going to mispronounce her name, but Marie Istan Schelspat, who is actually defending her PhD, or I don't know how you say defend, her PhD on the 25th of May, which is Thursday. So we wish her luck. So she's going to defend her PhD on Thursday, and then on Monday she's going to come and debrief with us about it. And then Ruth Churchill-Dawa, who will also be joining us, and I'm not sure if she's still here, but yes, Ruth is here. So thank you, Ruth, for being here. We look forward to hearing from you next week as well.
Thanks, George.
I will communicate on all of the various platforms about, send out the invite.
Yeah. So can I just say a big thank you to George for helping us coordinate all of this and the communication. That's really very important, and time frames and time zones and everything else. A big thank you to Roya, and a big thank you to Simone. We excited for you, Roya, as you embark on this journey, and want you to know that there's this community of people that are cheering from the sidelines. And so just we hope to continue to listen and learn from you about your work. And then to Simone, congratulations. It was just a short time ago, Dr. Blom. So we're very excited for you, and are looking forward to, I'm going to look up your articles that you wrote with your daughter. I've done maybe something slightly similar, looking forward to just learning from you as well. And then, as we've said, this is an open invitation. We have some other exciting things coming up in June, which we'll tell you about next week, but hopefully we'll have more time to return to people's work and their PhDs and the work that has been a part of part of this post-qualitative community. Thanks everyone for being here, for the different time zones. Go to bed, sleep well. Those of you sleeping well, wake up and enjoy your coffee. Those of you who are just waking up, and yeah, be safe, everyone.
And thank you, Rose-Anne.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to be here. Thanks again. Bye, everyone. Take care. Thank you. And Shane, George, I know you need to run to your... Thank you, George. Thanks, Karen. I know you're running off. Thanks, Viv. Take care. Bye, Nabonke. I think she may have left. And bye, Roya. We'll keep in touch with you. Will let us know how you're managing with your work. Cool. Take care. Bye.